The emergency lights bathed the coalition chamber in harsh red light. Ambassador Zix Theta's forearms trembled as he pushed his way to the speaker's platform. The Valorian's purple skin had turned almost white with fear. "Honored members," he began, his voice cracking through the translator. "We have detected something impossible near the human system." The great hall fell silent. 500 different species sat in the circular chamber, each in their own environmental pod. Some breathed methane, others needed water, and a few existed as pure energy. But they all turned toward Zixatheta with the same worried expression. "Show them," Zixatheta commanded. The hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed Neptune, the 8th planet in humanity's solar system. But something was wrong. Space itself seemed to bend and twist near one of its moons. "These readings started 3 days ago," Zixatheta continued. "The gravitational distortion is growing. Whatever is causing this has more mass than a small planet, but it's moving." The Krishnak representative stood up, her crystal body chiming with anxiety. "The humans must explain this. They're hiding weapons." Every eye, sensor, and detection organ turned to the human section. Admiral Chen sat perfectly still in her white uniform. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. Unlike the panicking aliens around her, she looked calm. "Too calm. Admiral Chen," the council speaker buzzed through its mechanical voice box. "What is your species hiding?" Chen stood slowly. She walked to the center platform with measured steps. The room held its breath. "We're hiding nothing," she said simply. "We don't know what this is any more than you do." "Lies," screamed the Alterian delegate, his tentacles turning bright orange with rage. "Your people have been too quiet, too cooperative since joining the coalition 50 years ago. You're planning something." Chen's expression didn't change. "We will cooperate fully with any investigation." The council voted immediately. Within an hour, a fleet of coalition inspection ships was heading toward Neptune. The finest sensors and weapons in known space powered toward the distortion. Chen watched the ships leave from the observation deck. She touched the small communicator hidden in her collar. "Phoenix to nest," she whispered. "The egg is cracking." 20 years ago, human miners on Triton had found something impossible. Buried under miles of ice was metal that shouldn't exist. It was harder than anything humans could make. It was older than human civilization. The government had kept it secret, studying it carefully. They'd found DNA scanners that only responded to human genetic codes. They'd found writing in languages that predated any known Earth culture. And they'd found a countdown timer that was nearly at 0. The coalition fleet arrived at Neptune in 12 hours. Captain Vrex of the Dominion Navy led the force. His ship's sensors immediately started screaming warnings. "Sir?" His science officer's scales turned pale blue. "The moon Triton is breaking apart." On the main screen, cracks appeared across the frozen moon's surface. Steam and gas erupted from the fissures. Something enormous was pushing its way out from inside. "All ships, combat positions," Vrex ordered, but they weren't ready for what emerged. The ship that broke free from Triton was beyond their understanding. 50 kilometers long, it looked like a mountain of metal and light. Its hull was covered in weapons that didn't match any known design. Strange symbols glowed along its sides. It moved without visible engines, ignoring the laws of physics the coalition thought they understood. Every ship's translator struggled with the message that followed. It broadcast in hundreds of Earth languages, some that no living human remembered. Prometheus protocol activated. "Mankind's vigil ends." Vrex tried to make contact. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Vrex of the Coalition Navy. Identify yourself and state your intentions." Silence. "Unknown vessel, you are in violation of Coalition space treaties. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded." The supercarrier's response was to activate a shield unlike anything the Coalition had seen. Space itself seemed to wrap around the ship like a blanket. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen received the encrypted message she'd been waiting for her entire career. Her grandfather had been one of the first to find the Triton site. He'd spent his life preparing his family for this moment. The message was simple: "Come home." The Coalition Council was in chaos. Representatives shouted in 500 languages. The Valorians demanded immediate military action. The Krishnak wanted to flee. The Alterians insisted this was a human trick. "Silence," the council speaker boomed. Its mechanical voice echoed off the walls. "Admiral Chen, you will explain this now." Chen stood again. This time she didn't look calm. She looked determined. "23 years ago, we found something on Triton," she began. The room erupted again, but she continued speaking over the noise. "We found evidence that humanity is older than we thought. Much older. The ship you're seeing isn't a weapon we built. It's a weapon our ancestors left behind." "Impossible," Zixtheta interrupted. "Humans only achieved spaceflight 200 years ago. You were using chemical rockets." "The humans you know did," Chen replied. "But we found proof that Earth has been home to humanity before. The last civilization fell 200,000 years ago. They left guardians behind. Watchers. Ships like this one programmed to sleep until humanity either returned to the stars or faced extinction." The hologram in the center of the room updated. The supercarrier was moving now, heading slowly toward Earth. Coalition ships tried to block its path, but their weapons couldn't penetrate its shields. One destroyer got too close and was gently pushed aside by some invisible force. "You're saying this ship has been waiting inside that moon for 200,000 years?" the speaker asked. "Yes," Chen said. And something woke it up. "The question we should be asking isn't what humanity is hiding. It's what triggered the Prometheus Protocol. What does that ship think is threatening mankind?" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If the ship was programmed to wake when humanity faced extinction, what had it detected that the Coalition's sensors hadn't found? A new alert screamed through the chamber. The Deep Space Monitoring Station at the edge of Coalition space had detected something. Ships were appearing from nowhere outside the galaxy's edge. They didn't match any known configuration. The ancient supercarrier suddenly accelerated, moving faster than should be possible for something its size. It broadcast a new message, this time in modern Coalition standard. "Enemy detected. The Devourers return. All human genetic carriers report for duty. All allied species recommend immediate defensive preparations. Time to first contact, 7 solar days." Admiral Chen's communicator buzzed with an encrypted message from Earth's government. She read it twice before looking up at the terrified faces around her. "The Coalition has a choice," she said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. "You can fight us for control of that ship. Waste time and resources trying to understand technology that took our ancestors millennia to perfect. Or you can accept our help against whatever is coming." Zixtheta found his voice first. "You're asking us to trust you when you've hidden this from us?" "We hid it because we didn't understand it," Chen replied. "Now it seems we're all going to learn together. That ship recognizes something called the Devourers. Our ancient databases mention them only once in a fragment we could barely translate. It says they consumed 1,000 worlds before humanity stopped them, and now they're coming back." The Coalition Council had ruled the galaxy in peace for 3,000 years. They'd never faced an external threat. Now as they watched the impossible human ship power toward Earth, they realized their peaceful age might be ending, and their newest, most primitive member might be their only hope of survival. Captain Sarah Morrison stood in the shuttle bay of the Coalition station, watching her hand-picked team prepare. 25 humans, each chosen for specific skills and genetic markers. The ancient ship had been broadcasting for 12 hours now, calling for humans with specific DNA sequences. Sarah had the highest match at 93%. "Captain, you can't be serious about boarding that thing," Lieutenant Torres said, checking his equipment for the 3rd time. "We don't know what's on there." "We know it's calling for us," Sarah replied. She was young for a captain, only 35, but her eyes held the weight of responsibility. "And we know those things at the galaxy's edge are getting closer." The Coalition had tried everything. 3 boarding attempts by their best soldiers had failed. The ship's defenses didn't kill. They simply pushed intruders away with invisible walls of force. But when the first human probe approached, a docking bay had opened peacefully. Admiral Chen watched from the command center as Sarah's shuttle launched. The old woman wished she could go herself, but her genetic markers were too diluted. Whatever the ancients had used to identify their descendants, it required pure bloodlines that few modern humans possessed. The supercarrier grew larger as they approached. Up close, it was even more impossible. The hull wasn't made of any metal the scanners recognized. It seemed to shift and flow like liquid while staying solid. Weapons ports that looked decorative suddenly made sense as the human mind processed them. They were designed for human eyes to understand. Eternal Defiance, Sarah read the name painted in symbols that hurt to look at. That's what it's calling itself. The docking bay was enormous. Their shuttle was like a fly landing on a dinner table. As soon as they stepped out, lights activated, leading deeper into the ship. The air was fresh. impossibly so after 200,000 years. "Welcome, children of Earth." A voice spoke directly into their minds, not through their ears but inside their thoughts. "I am Prometheus, guardian of humanity's legacy." Sarah stepped forward. "We're here. What do you need from us?" The walls came alive with images. Stars being born and dying, galaxies spinning through the void, and then humanity. But not the humanity they knew. These humans were taller, stronger. Their eyes glowed with internal light. They built cities that floated in space and ships that could crack planets. "Your ancestors ruled 30% of this galaxy," Prometheus explained. "They were just but powerful. They uplifted species, protected the weak, and brought order to chaos, until the Devourers came. The images changed. Darkness spreading across space like oil, planets stripped bare in hours, fleets of magnificent ships being torn apart and consumed. The things attacking weren't ships exactly. They were somewhere between organic and mechanical, constantly changing and adapting. We fought for 300 years, Prometheus continued. In the end, humanity made a choice. They would fall, but they would ensure their children could rise again. They seeded Earth with primitive humans, wiped clean of memory and technology. They built ships like me to wait and watch. When mankind reached the stars again, or when the Devourers returned, we would wake. Both things happened, Sarah said, understanding dawning on her face. Yes, you reached the stars, and this stirred them from their slumber. They remember humanity. They hunger for revenge. The team followed the lights deeper into the ship. They passed halls that could hold thousands, weapon bays with devices that looked more like art than armaments, and then they reached the cryo bays. Millions of pods stretched as far as they could see. Each one held a human from the ancient era, perfectly preserved. Sarah approached the nearest pod. Inside was a man who looked like he could be her brother, if her brother was 7 feet tall and had circuitry patterns under his skin. They volunteered to sleep, Prometheus explained. The best of humanity's warriors, scientists, and leaders. They knew they would wake to a universe that had forgotten them, but they chose to be guardians for their descendants. "How many?" Torres whispered. 3,400,007, Prometheus replied precisely. "Enough to crew a full battle fleet. Enough to teach you what you need to know." Back at the Coalition station, panic was spreading. The mysterious ships at the galaxy's edge had destroyed 3 monitoring posts. No weapons, no communication, just gone. The only message was from a fleeing cargo ship whose captain had screamed about shadows that ate his hull before the signal cut out. The Coalition Council was demanding answers. Zix Theta stood before a war council of the galaxy's greatest military minds, and none of them had any ideas. "The humans must surrender the ship to us," General Krex of the Valorian Empire stated. His 6 eyes focused on Admiral Chen. "It's the only way to ensure fairness," Chen laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. "The ship won't respond to you. Your boarding parties prove that. Then make it respond." Krex slammed his armored fist on the table. "You primitive apes stumble onto ancient technology and think you can keep it for yourselves?" "General," Chen's voice was ice cold. "That ship was left by our ancestors specifically for us. It's not about fairness. It's about survival. Those things coming for us remember humanity. They're coming for revenge against us. Would you rather we face them without our inheritance?" On the Eternal Defiance, Sarah's team had reached the command center. It was beautiful and terrible. The captain's chair wasn't just a seat, it was a neural interface. The ship didn't have a crew, it became part of the crew. "To activate my full capabilities, I need a human commander," Prometheus said. "Someone with the correct genetic markers and the will to lead." "Captain Morrison, you are compatible." Sarah looked at the chair. She understood what it meant. Once she connected, she would know everything the ship knew. But she would also be changed forever. "Do it," she said, sitting down. The neural connection was like drowning in starlight. Suddenly, Sarah could feel the entire ship. Every corridor, every weapon, every sleeping warrior. She could sense the Coalition fleet surrounding them, primitive and fragile. And in the distance, she could feel them. The Devourers. They were hunger-given form. "My God," she whispered, but her voice now carried harmonics that weren't human. "There are so many of them." The first cryopod opened. The man inside stepped out as if he'd been sleeping for minutes, not millennia. He was tall, muscled beyond what seemed natural, with silver eyes that held no pupils. He looked at Sarah in her chair and saluted. Praetor Marcus Aurelius, 3rd Fleet, reporting for duty, he said in perfect modern English. The ship had updated his language while he slept. What is the situation, Commander? Sarah found she knew his entire service record. 300 battles, 50 worlds defended. The last stand at Andromeda Gate where he held off a devourer swarm for 6 days with just his battalion. The enemy has returned, Praetor. We have 7 days before they reach inhabited space. The current galactic civilization has no experience with warfare on this scale. Marcus nodded as if this was expected. How many of us are awake? Just you so far. Wake the combat units first. We'll need to train the new humans quickly. The ship tells me they've forgotten how to wage real war. Over the next hours, more pods opened. Each ancient human was a masterpiece of genetic engineering. They were faster, stronger, and smarter than modern humans. But they looked at Sarah and her team with kindness, not superiority. You are our children, a woman named Diana explained. She had been a scientist, her mind enhanced to process information at superhuman speeds. We failed to stop them permanently, but we gave you time to grow. Now we stand together. The coalition was not handling the news well. When Sarah transmitted the full history from the ship's database, several species had mental breakdowns. They were living in the ruins of humanity's old empire. The trade routes they used were paths humanity had carved. The dead worlds they avoided were planets humanity had sacrificed to slow the devourers. This changes everything, the council speaker announced. If this history is true, humans have prior claim to 30% of our territory. We don't want territory, Admiral Chen said quickly. We want to survive. All of us. The ancient humans were teaching the modern ones at an incredible pace. The ship had training programs that downloaded information directly into the brain. In hours, Sarah's crew learned combat techniques that should take years to master, but it was the ship itself that was the real weapon. As more systems came online, its true power became clear. It could manipulate gravity, bend space, and fire weapons that deleted matter from existence. It was less a ship and more a mobile apocalypse. The Devourers adapt, Marcus explained to a gathering of coalition military leaders. They'd finally been allowed aboard under guard. Every weapon that doesn't kill them completely makes them stronger. They consume technology and biology equally. That's why our ancestors built weapons that don't leave anything behind to adapt to. The demonstration was sobering. A single fighter drone from the Eternal Defiance destroyed an asteroid. Not exploded, not melted. The asteroid simply ceased to exist, its matter converted to energy that dissipated into space. We have 6 days, Sarah announced from her neural throne. She could feel the Devourers getting closer, their hunger reaching out like tentacles through space. We need to wake more ships. The council chamber was dead silent as Prometheus displayed the full historical records. Ambassador Zixatheta's forearm shook as he read about his own species. The Valorians hadn't evolved naturally to sentience. They'd been uplifted by ancient humanity 40,000 years after the fall. This is impossible, he muttered, but the genetic evidence was undeniable. Valorian DNA contained markers, signatures left by human genetic engineering. Diana, the ancient human scientist, stood calmly before 500 species. Her enhanced eyes could process all their reactions simultaneously. Your histories are not lies, merely incomplete. After humanity fell, you rose from the ashes we left behind. The ruins you built upon, the technologies you reverse-engineered, the trade routes you follow, all were ours once. The Krishnak representative chimed in distress. You're saying we're living in your grave? You're living in our garden, Diana corrected gently. We planted seeds before we fell. Not just human seeds on Earth, but the seeds of civilization across the galaxy. You are all our children in a way. 3 coalition scout fleets had gone dark. The last transmission was always the same. Screaming, then nothing. The edge of the galaxy was being eaten and it was accelerating. On the bridge of the Eternal Defiance, Sarah felt each loss through the ship's sensors. The neural connection was changing her. She could process information like the ancients now, her brain rewired by the chair. She watched 100 data streams at once and understood them all. They're not just destroying, she announced to the War Council. They're learning. Each ship they consume teaches them about our current technology. Marcus stood beside her chair, a guardian and advisor. In 3 days, he'd organized the awakened ancient warriors into a functioning battalion. Only 50,000 were awake so far, but each was worth 100 modern soldiers. We need the other ships, he said simply. 1 supercarrier won't be enough. Sarah nodded and reached out through the ship's communication array. The signal went deep into Earth's oceans, to Mars's polar caps, to Jupiter's moons. Ancient humanity had hidden 12 more supercarriers throughout the solar system. They'd been waiting for this call. The Pacific Ocean boiled as something rose from the Mariana Trench. The USS Philadelphia, investigating the disturbance, barely escaped the tidal wave as a mountain of metal emerged from waters that had hidden it for eons. The ship broadcast its name, Unbroken Promise. On Mars, the polar cap exploded outward. Final defiance pulled itself from the red soil, shaking off millennia of rust and dust. Its hull immediately began self-repairing, nanotechnology older than recorded history making it pristine in minutes. One by one, 12 more ships answered the call. Each carried millions of sleeping warriors. Each possessed weapons that violated the Coalition's understanding of physics. Together, they formed humanity's inheritance, a fleet built to fight the impossible. But the Coalition was fracturing. Some species wanted to flee, to run to other galaxies. Others demanded the humans share all technology immediately. The Valorian Empire mobilized its entire fleet, officially to fight the Devourers. But everyone knew they were positioning to claim the supercarriers if humanity fell. You have to understand, Admiral Chen explained to an emergency session. These ships won't work for you. They're genetically locked to human DNA. Even we can barely operate them. Only those with the purest ancient markers can fully interface. Then give us the technology to build our own. General Krex demanded. Diana laughed, but it wasn't cruel. General, your species just discovered fusion power 3 centuries ago. These ships use energy sources you won't understand for another 1,000 years. It would be like giving nuclear weapons to cave dwellers. The insult stung, but it was accurate. When the ancient humans demonstrated their basic fighter craft, the Coalition's best scientists couldn't even understand how it stayed in the air. It didn't use thrust or anti-gravity. It simply convinced space that it was somewhere else. The first real battle came at Outpost 7, the edge of Coalition space. A small Devourer scout force, only 100 units, emerged from whatever dimension they'd been sleeping in. The Coalition sent its newest fleet, 500 of their best ships. The massacre lasted 12 minutes. The Devourers didn't fight like ships. They flowed like liquid metal through space, surrounding and consuming vessels. Coalition weapons that hit them were absorbed, analyzed, and turned back stronger. Energy shields were eaten like candy. Hull armor was dissolved and incorporated. The brave crews were transformed into biological components of the growing Devourer mass. Only one ship escaped, a courier vessel that ran the moment the battle began. Its captain's report was hysteria mixed with truth. They don't destroy. They eat. They ate everything. They're coming. Sarah felt the battle through the ship's long-range sensors. She turned to the assembled Coalition representatives aboard her bridge. Now you understand. Your weapons feed them. Your shields make them stronger. Every conventional defense is just another meal. Then how did ancient humanity fight them? Zix Theta asked, his purple skin pale with fear. Marcus activated a hologram from one of his memories. It showed an ancient battle. Human ships firing beams that unraveled matter at the quantum level. Weapons that created temporary black holes. Fighters that phased in and out of reality. And the Devourers adapting to each one, getting stronger, learning. We fought by never using the same weapon twice, Marcus explained. By the end of the war, we were inventing new ways to kill them in real time. The supercarriers can do this. They have quantum computers that create new weapon configurations faster than the Devourers can adapt. But there was something else in the memory, something that made everyone step back. The ancient humans in the battle were laughing. Even as they died, even as they were consumed, they laughed and fought harder. Your ancestors were insane, Akrishnak observed. No, Diana corrected. We were human. When faced with extinction, we chose to be extinction itself. We became worse than our enemies' nightmares. The awakening process accelerated. 1 million ancient warriors were conscious now, spread across the 13 supercarriers. Each ship became a hive of activity. Modern humans were being trained, their bodies enhanced with nanomachines that had waited centuries to activate. They weren't becoming as powerful as the ancients, but they were becoming more than they were. Lieutenant Torres was the first to complete the full enhancement. His eyes now held flecks of silver. He could run for days without rest. His mind could process combat at superhuman speeds. He was still himself, but more. How does it feel? Sarah asked from her throne. Like I've been sleeping my whole life and just woke up, Torres replied. The Devourer's main force was detected 4 days out. Not hundreds of units. Not thousands, millions. They moved like a plague through space, a wave of hunger that turned matter into more of themselves. Planets in their path were marked for evacuation, but everyone knew there wasn't enough time. The coalition finally agreed to follow humanity's lead, though not happily. Their fleets would form the second line of defense. If the supercarriers fell, they would buy time for evacuation. Nobody said what everyone thought. If the supercarriers fell, nothing would stop the Devourers. Prometheus had been analyzing the enemy constantly. They remember us, the AI announced. Their attack patterns are specifically designed to counter ancient humanity's old tactics. They've been preparing for this rematch for 200,000 years. Good, Marcus said, surprising everyone. That means they'll be surprised when we use tactics we never had before. What tactics? Sarah asked. Marcus smiled, and it was predatory. You modern humans have something we never did. You've had peace. You've had time to think, to innovate without the pressure of constant war. You see solutions we never could. Together, ancient wisdom and modern creativity, we might surprise them. The ancient ships were moving into position now. 13 supercarriers, each 50 kilometers of impossibility. Behind them, 20,000 coalition vessels tried to look brave. On every human world, people watched the sky and wondered if they'd see another dawn. Sarah opened a channel to all human forces, ancient and modern. They think we're the same humans they fought before. They're wrong. We're not just the children of Earth anymore. We're the children of the entire galaxy. We've learned from every species, every culture. We're more than our ancestors were. She paused, feeling the weight of history. And we're angry. They took our empire. They killed our ancestors. They forced us to forget who we were. But we remember now. And we're going to show them why humanity was worth fearing. The first Devourer scouts entered sensor range. They moved wrong, like space itself was sick where they passed. But the 13 supercarriers stood firm, their shields creating a wall of twisted reality that said simply, no further. In her throne, Sarah felt the ship's eagerness. It had waited so long for this. The weapons were charging reality-breaking energies that had been dormant for eons. Around her, ancient and modern humans worked together, preparing for a battle that would decide the fate of all life in the galaxy. Contact in 10 hours, Prometheus announced. All systems optimal. Victory probability calculating. Unable to determine. Too many unknown variables. Marcus laughed, and it spread through the ancient warriors. Soon even the modern humans were smiling grimly. The first wave hit at exactly 600 Earth Standard Time. Sarah felt them coming through the ship's sensors like a wave of wrongness against reality itself. The Devourers didn't arrive like normal ships. They tore holes in space and poured through like oil. All carriers pattern Alpha, Sarah commanded through the neural link. Her mind touched the other 12 supercarrier commanders simultaneously. Each was now like her, merged with their ships, more than human but not quite machine. The Eternal Defiance fired first. The weapon had no name because ancient humanity had never needed to name it. It simply deleted a section of space 1 kilometer wide and 10 kilometers long. Everything in that space ceased to exist, including several hundred Devourer units. But they learned. The next wave spread out, making such weapons inefficient. They flowed around the deletion zones like water around rocks. Pattern shift, execute, Marcus ordered from his position at the tactical station. His enhanced mind processed battle data from all 13 supercarriers at once. The ancient warriors moved with perfect synchronization. Fighter craft that shouldn't exist launched from the carriers. Each one was piloted by an ancient human, whose reflexes operated faster than modern computers. They didn't fly their ships, they wore them like armor. Lieutenant Torres watched from his position on the secondary bridge. His newly enhanced body could barely follow the ancient warriors' movements. They danced through space, their fighters phasing in and out of reality. When a Devourer unit tried to consume one, the fighter would shift into another dimension, letting the enemy eat empty space. But the Devourers adapted. They started predicting the phase shifts, waiting in multiple dimensions at once. 3 ancient fighters were caught and consumed in seconds. The enemy units that ate them immediately grew stronger, faster. They're learning too quickly, Diana announced from her science station. At this rate, they'll counter all our weapons in 6 hours. Sarah smiled from her throne. Then we'll have to get creative. Modern tactical teams, you're up. This was the plan Marcus had suggested. Modern humans didn't think like ancient ones. They'd grown up with different stories, different strategies. Where ancient humanity fought with overwhelming force, modern humanity had learned subtlety. Captain Lisa Park, a modern human from Korea, proposed something insane. Let them eat one of our drones, but fill it with a virus. They'll adapt to any virus in seconds, Diana protested. Not a computer virus, Lisa explained. A philosophical one. Send them a drone filled with paradoxes, impossible equations, questions with no answers. Make them think about things that can't be resolved. It was crazy enough to try. A specially prepared drone flew directly into a devourer mass. The creature consumed it eagerly, then stopped. It shuddered. Its form, which had been flowing like liquid, suddenly crystallized. Then it shattered, breaking into a million pieces that dissolved into nothing. It worked, Torres shouted. They can't process paradoxes. But the devourers learned from this too. The next wave ignored the paradox drones entirely. The battle became a constant evolution, each side adapting to the other's adaptations. Coalition forces watched in awe and terror. The Valorian flagship recorded everything, and General Krex couldn't believe what he was seeing. Space itself was being used as a weapon. The human supercarriers were creating gravity wells that crushed devourer units into singular points. They were opening portals that led nowhere, trapping enemies in pocket dimensions that collapsed. How is any of this possible? He demanded. His science officer, usually composed, was crying. Sir, they're not fighting with technology. They're fighting with controlled impossibilities. Each weapon breaks physics in a different way. The battle raged for 3 hours. For every devourer destroyed, 10 more seemed to appear. They poured from tiers in space like an endless infection. But humanity held the line. 13 supercarriers working in perfect coordination created a wall of destruction nothing could pass. Then the real enemy arrived. The Devourer Prime was the size of a moon. It emerged from a rift that made space scream. Every sensor that looked at it directly burned out. It wasn't just hungry, it was hunger incarnate. The smaller units were just its antibodies, its immune system. This was the actual creature. By the void, Six Theta whispered from the Coalition observation post. That thing could eat planets. Sarah felt the eternal defiance's fear. The ship, for all its power, recognized a predator that had killed its siblings before. But she also felt its rage. This thing had destroyed ancient humanity. It would not destroy their children. All carriers maximum firepower on my mark, Sarah commanded. Everything we have. 13 supercarriers aligned their primary weapons. Energy that could crack moons charged in their cores. Space itself bent around them from the gravitational distortion of so much power in one place. Fire. The beams that lanced out were visible from Earth with the naked eye. 13 streams of pure destruction, each one a different flavor of impossibility. They hit the Devourer Prime simultaneously. The creature screamed. Not with sound, but with gravity waves that made nearby moons crack. It writhed, its moon-sized bulk trying to adapt to 13 different types of annihilation at once. For a moment, it seemed to be working. The beams were being absorbed, analyzed. Then Marcus did something unexpected. He laughed over the communication system. Not bitter laughter, but genuine joy. You want to eat our weapons? Fine, eat this. He activated something called the Prometheus Protocol Final Option. Every ancient warrior understood immediately. Every modern human felt it through their neural links. The supercarriers weren't just firing weapons. They were feeding the Devourer Prime the memory of humanity's death. 200,000 years of grief, rage, and bitter determination flooded into the creature's consciousness. Emotions were not matter or energy. They couldn't be adapted to or consumed. They were information patterns that meant nothing to a creature of pure hunger. But when force-fed the death memories of a trillion humans, even a devourer could choke. The Prime convulsed. Its perfect adaptation systems tried to process feelings they weren't designed for. It felt the last thoughts of every human who had died in the ancient war. It experienced love, loss, hope, despair, and above all, defiance. Humans who died laughing. Humans who died crying. Humans who died to save strangers. Humans who died alone but unbroken. Now, Sarah commanded. While it stunned, the 13 supercarriers changed formation, forming a perfect circle around the convulsing Prime. They activated weapons that hadn't been used since the last war. Reality anchors that prevented the creature from escaping to another dimension. Stasis fields that slowed its adaptation. And finally, the weapon ancient humanity had been building when they fell. Is that? Diana breathed. They finished it? The causality cannon didn't destroy matter or energy. It destroyed cause and effect. It fired a beam that convinced reality the target had never existed in the first place. The universe itself would edit out the contradiction, but it required all 13 supercarriers to power it. They had to lower their shields, leave themselves vulnerable, and the smaller devourers were still attacking, eating through fighter screens, approaching the defenseless carriers. Coalition forces finally understood their role. General Krex's voice boomed across the communication channels. All Coalition vessels, protect those carriers. Buy them time. 20,000 Coalition ships surged forward. They knew their weapons couldn't kill devourers, but they could slow them down. They could be shields. The Valorians, the Krishnak, the Alterians. Every species that had doubted humanity now threw themselves between the devourers and the charging supercarriers. Coalition ships died by the hundreds. They were consumed, dissolved, erased. But they kept coming. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. Species that had been enemies for centuries fought side by side. They were all children of the galaxy, and they would protect their elder siblings. Torres watched, tears streaming down modern human faces as they saw the galaxy unite to protect them. Ancient warriors who had known only war looked stunned at the sacrifice of strangers. 10 more seconds, Prometheus announced. Causality cannon at 90%. The Devourer Prime was recovering from the emotion bomb. Its adaptation systems were purging the human memories, returning to pure hunger. But it was too late. Causality cannon ready, Sarah announced. Her voice carried across every communication channel in the galaxy. Firing. The weapon didn't make a sound. There was no dramatic beam of light. The Devourer Prime simply started to fade. It looked confused if a moon-sized monster could look confused. It reached out with tentacles of dark matter trying to grab onto existence. But the universe had decided it had never been born. The smaller devourers felt their prime disappearing and went insane. They attacked everything, including each other. Without the prime's controlling intelligence, they were just hungry animals. Dangerous but mortal. All units clean up operations, Marcus commanded. Pattern Zeta, no survivors. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The coalition forces, emboldened by their successful defense, fought harder. They'd learned that while they couldn't kill devourers, they could hurt them. They could slow them. They could buy time for humanity's weapons to work. 4 more hours of brutal combat followed. The Coalition Council chamber had been rebuilt. The emergency red lights were gone, replaced with soft blue illumination that represented peace. But the beings gathered there would never be the same. They had seen the face of extinction and watched humanity stare it down without blinking. Sarah Morrison stood before them, no longer in the neural throne. The battle had changed her permanently. Her eyes held depths that hadn't been there before. The weight of commanding a ship that could crack worlds. Beside her stood Marcus, Diana, and Admiral Chen, ancient and modern humanity united. The threat is over, Sarah began. Our deep space sensors show no more devourer signatures. The Cascade virus we deployed in the final hour has spread to their dimension. Any that survived are destroying themselves. The Cascade virus had been another modern human innovation. Instead of killing devourers, it made them hungrier. So hungry they would eat themselves, then eat the void where they had been, creating an endless loop of self-consumption. It was cruel. It was brilliant. It was human. Zix Theta stood to speak. His purple skin bore new scars from the battle, earned when his ship had rammed a devourer to buy the supercarriers another second of charging time. What happens now? Humanity has 13 planet-killer ships and millions of enhanced warriors. You could conquer the galaxy. Marcus laughed, but it was warm, not threatening. We did that once. It didn't end well. We have no interest in conquest. Then what do you want? The council speaker asked. Diana stepped forward. To teach, to share, to grow together. The technologies in our ships are too advanced to simply hand over, but we can guide you toward them. What took us 1,000,000 years to learn, you could master in 1,000 with our help. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Coalition would be reformed with humanity as an elder species, guides and teachers rather than rulers. The ancient warriors would help train coalition forces for future threats. The supercarriers would stand guard at the galaxy's edge, eternal watchers against the dark. But first, there was rebuilding to do. Earth had become the galaxy's most important world overnight. The hidden shipyards and Jupiter's moons activated fully, not to build weapons but to create technology that would help rebuild the destroyed coalition worlds. Ancient humanity's medical technology could cure diseases that had plagued species for millennia. Their agricultural systems could feed entire systems from a single farm world. Torres, now enhanced and serving as liaison between ancient and modern forces, stood in one of the shipyards watching new vessels take shape. These weren't warships but seed ships, designed to restore dead worlds to life. Your ancestors terraformed thousands of worlds, Prometheus explained through the shipyard's speakers. That knowledge was preserved. Worlds killed by the Devourers can live again. Within weeks, the first restored world bloomed. A planet that had been dead stone for 3 days sprouted with life as ancient terraforming machines worked their magic. Refugees who had fled returned to find their world not just restored but improved. The air was cleaner, the soil richer. General Krex of the Valorian Empire approached Marcus during a joint training exercise. The proud general's 6 eyes showed something they rarely did: humility. "I owe you an apology," Krex said. "I called your species primitive. I see now we were children playing with toys while you were sleeping giants." Marcus clasped the general's armored shoulder. "We were all children once. Now we grow together." The integration wasn't without problems. Some coalition species struggled to accept that their entire histories were footnotes in humanity's story. Others worried that humanity would eventually seek revenge for being forced to forget their heritage. These fears were addressed in a special session. Sarah, speaking for all humanity, made a declaration that would be remembered for millennia. "We do not blame you for our fall. The Devourers did that. You rose from our ashes and built something beautiful. You are not living in our shadow. You are casting your own light. We are not your returning masters. We are your awakened family." The ancient humans integrated into coalition society slowly. Many chose to return to sleep in the supercarriers, taking shifts standing guard. Others walked among the coalition species, sharing knowledge and learning how the galaxy had changed. Diana established the first mixed species science academy on Mars, where ancient knowledge met modern innovation. The results were spectacular. Within a year, the coalition had developed faster-than-light communication that worked instantly across any distance. Medical nanomachines that could repair any injury. Energy sources that could power entire civilizations from a single star. But perhaps the most significant change was psychological. The galaxy had united against a common enemy and won. Species that had barely tolerated each other now shared technology freely. The Krishnak's crystalline biology helped improve coalition shields. The Alterians' shapeshifting led to adaptive armor. The Valorians' strength enhanced ground combat techniques. Humanity shared everything except the deepest secrets of the supercarriers. Those weapons were too dangerous, capable of unmaking reality itself. They would remain humanity's burden, their responsibility as guardians. 6 months after the battle, a monument was unveiled on Earth's moon. It listed every ship, every soul lost in the battle against the Devourers from every species. The monument's centerpiece was a statue of a coalition vessel, shielding a human supercarrier, representing the moment the galaxy truly became one. Sarah visited the monument often. The neural throne had left its mark on her. She could still feel the eternal defiance in her mind, a gentle presence that would never fully fade. Sometimes she could sense the other 12 supercarrier commanders, a network of enhanced humans who would always be connected. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, finding her there one day. "No," Sarah replied. "We saved everyone. That's what matters." "We did more than that," Marcus corrected. "We gave them hope. Ancient humanity fell alone. Modern humanity rose with friends. That's evolution." A year passed. The galaxy had changed completely. Trade flowed on routes protected by human patrols. Worlds that had been quarantined as too dangerous were cleansed and colonized. Species that had been dying were saved by ancient medical knowledge. The Eternal Defiance and its sister ships took positions throughout the galaxy. They didn't rule or interfere. They simply existed, reminders that humanity watched over all. Their presence alone ended most conflicts. No species wanted to explain to a 50-kilometer supercarrier why they were attacking their neighbors, but the ships served another purpose. They were schools where young beings of all species could learn. The ancient warriors taught not just combat but philosophy, art, and science. They shared the culture of ancient humanity, the songs and stories that had been sleeping for eons. Torres was appointed as the first director of interspecies development. His job was to ensure that technology was shared responsibly, that no species advanced too quickly and repeated ancient humanity's mistakes. He worked from an office in the Eternal Defiance where he could consult with both Prometheus and the ancient advisors. "We're receiving a message," Prometheus announced one day. From beyond the galaxy, the command crew assembled quickly. Sarah resumed her throne, the neural connection snapping back like she'd never left. The message was simple, broadcast in ancient human code. "We are the architects. We seeded your galaxy with life. We have watched your victory over our failed experiment. You have passed the test. We invite you to join the intergalactic community." The implications were staggering. The Devourers had been a test? There was a community of galaxies? Ancient humanity's rise and fall had been observed? Admiral Chen, now elderly but still sharp, spoke first. "We need the Coalition's input on this. This decision affects everyone." The debate lasted weeks. Some species wanted to immediately join this intergalactic community. Others feared it was another trap. The ancient humans were split too. Some remembered legends of the architects, beings of pure energy that existed between galaxies. Others suspected this was how the Devourers had first arrived. Finally, a consensus was reached. They would respond, but cautiously. A joint expedition would be sent with representatives from every coalition species and both ancient and modern humanity. The Eternal Defiance would lead, its weapons ready for anything. Sarah commanded the mission. As they approached the galaxy's edge, where space itself grew thin, a structure appeared. It was impossible to describe, existing in more dimensions than the mind could process. It was older than the universe should allow. "Welcome, inheritors," a voice spoke directly into every mind. "You have proven that cooperation is stronger than consumption. Your galaxy is mature enough to join the greater community." What they learned changed everything again. The universe was full of galaxies that had passed similar tests. Each had faced their own version of the Devourers, experiments by the architects to test if life could overcome pure entropy. Most failed. Earth's galaxy was one of the few that succeeded. "You succeeded because humanity fell and rose again," the architect explained. "Most species that fall stay fallen. You chose to plant seeds for your descendants. That wisdom, that hope is rare." The intergalactic community offered trade, knowledge, and protection, but it also offered responsibility. Earth's galaxy would need to help test others.